Variant, standard, title, She was my photographer, Part 1, the beginning. ID, 49621. She was supposed to be just another photographer. That's what I told myself when she first raised the camera and looked at me through the lens, calm, steady, unreadable. But there was something in that silence between the shutter clicks, something that felt like she was seeing too much. Not just my face. Me. Her name was Elena. She moved like someone who'd learned to be careful with her steps, every motion deliberate, every glance considered. Mid-40s, maybe? The kind of woman who didn't chase attention, but somehow made a room shift around her anyway. And I was just the client. Or the subject. Or whatever I was pretending to be. The studio was small, just a single light overhead, walls washed in soft gray. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, the low rustle of her scarf, as she moved past me. My heartbeat was too loud for a room that quiet. "Look toward the light," she said softly. Her voice carried warmth and something else beneath it, restraint maybe. I turned, and she adjusted my posture with a gentle touch on my shoulder. Just a moment, but her fingers lingered, not long enough to mean something, not short enough to mean nothing. My breath caught anyway. "You're tense," she murmured, lowering the camera for a moment. "You don't have to be." "I'm not used to being on this side of the lens," I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant. She smiled, and it wasn't professional, it was knowing. Like she could see exactly why. "Most people aren't," she said. "But that's what makes it honest." She stepped closer, the soft click of her shoes marking the space between us until there wasn't much left. Her perfume, subtle, earthy, like rain on wood, settled around me. I tried not to move, not to show how aware I was of her nearness. She adjusted my collar, the edge of her finger grazing my neck. A single spark, small and ridiculous, but it stayed. "Better," she whispered. The camera lifted again. I looked at her, not the lens. Her eyes didn't waver. There was something in them, curiosity, maybe, or a question she wasn't going to ask out loud. And for a few frames, I forgot to breathe. She exhaled softly and lowered the camera. "That's enough for today." The words should have released me. Instead, they tightened something I couldn't name. I stepped back, giving her space, pretending I wasn't reluctant to do it. She gathered her things, quiet, efficient. I wanted to say something, to break the silence, to ask if she ever felt seen like that too. But my throat locked. Finally, she looked up. "You did well," she said. "You let yourself be seen." I almost laughed. "I didn't mean to." Her gaze held mine, steady, deliberate. "The best kind never is." She turned then, walking toward the door at the far end of the studio, her hand brushing the frame as she paused. There was a flicker of hesitation, a small tilt of her head like she was about to say something more, something not part of the session. I waited, every second stretching thin. And then, before she could speak, the door opened. A cold draft swept in, scattering a few loose prints across the floor. She glanced at me once, something unreadable in her eyes, and then looked away. "Next week, same time?" she asked, voice calm again. I nodded, though either of us moved to leave. For a moment, everything hung in the air between us, the quiet hum, the scent of her perfume, the question she didn't ask. Then she smiled, faint and restrained. "Good. We'll continue then." And she was gone. Variant, standard, title, She was my photographer, Part 2, expanding the conflict. ID, 49622. I told myself I was only going back for the photos. That it wasn't about her, the way her voice softened around certain words, or how she seemed to notice things I didn't say. But when I stepped into the studio again a week later, the air felt different. Warmer. Quieter. She was adjusting the lighting near the backdrop, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly undone. For the first time, she didn't look composed, she looked human. "Right on time," she said without turning. "I thought you might cancel." "Why would I?" She glanced over her shoulder. People usually do, once they realize being seen isn't as comfortable as they imagined. I almost told her she was right. But then she smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, and I caught a flicker of something unguarded. Tiredness, maybe? Or loneliness. I learned later she'd been divorced for years. 2 grown kids, both away. She'd mentioned it in passing, like facts from a resume. But the way she avoided talking about home said more than words could. As she moved behind the camera, I noticed the thin gold band she still wore on her right hand. Habit, not attachment. Still, I couldn't stop staring. Look up, she said. No, not like that. Let it feel natural. She stepped forward, lifting my chin slightly. Her thumb brushed my jaw, a whisper of touch that shouldn't have meant anything. My pulse disagreed. She hesitated before lowering her hand, and I saw it, that same flicker from last time. The one she tried to hide behind professionalism. I shifted my weight, trying to play casual. You ever get tired of this? Of what? Capturing other people. Seeing them up close, but never really being seen yourself. Her hands stilled on the camera. She didn't look up, but her lips parted slightly, as if to answer, then closed again. It's part of the job, she said finally. The tone was practiced, but the silence after wasn't. The rest of the session blurred. Light, shadow, the soft rhythm of the shutter. Every time she stepped closer, I caught the faint scent of her perfume. Every time her hand brushed my sleeve to adjust something, I had to remind myself not to lean in. When she paused to check a photo, I watched her from across the room, the concentration in her brow, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She looked younger for a moment. Or maybe just unguarded. You keep staring, she said suddenly, eyes still on the camera screen. I swallowed. You make it hard not to. That earned me a look, not sharp, not amused. Something in between. You shouldn't say things like that, she said quietly. Why not? Because they sound honest. The words hung there, either of us moving. Then, almost without thinking, she reached out, fingers brushing a wrinkle from my shirt collar. The gesture was small, but it stayed too long to be neutral. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a heartbeat, either of us looked away. The air thickened, fragile as glass. Then the studio light flickered, buzzing faintly, enough to make her step back, breaking whatever had been building. She cleared her throat. That's enough for today. But her voice trembled, just slightly. And when she passed me the door key to lock up, her hand grazed mine, a touch too brief, too charged to be accidental. Neither of us said a word. But something had shifted. Something we both pretended not to notice. Variant, standard, title, She was my photographer, Part 3, Heightening Suspense. ID, 49623. The third session wasn't supposed to happen so soon. She texted the night before, If you're free tomorrow, I have a cancellation. I told myself it was nothing. Just work. But when I arrived, she already had the lights set, the stool positioned just so, her hair tied up like she didn't have time to think about it. Good, she said, glancing at her watch. You're early. I didn't want to keep you waiting. She gave a short laugh, one that didn't quite sound like her. I wasn't sure you would come. Something in her tone made me pause. It wasn't teasing, it was uncertain. And that scared me more than I'd admit. The session started quietly. The rhythm we'd fallen into before was gone. Each instruction felt slower, heavier. When she moved around me, I could feel the space shrink, the air thickening with something that wasn't just tension anymore. Hold still, she said. The light's perfect right there. Her hand reached out to adjust the angle of my face. I felt the brush of her palm against my cheek. It lingered. Too long. Elena. She froze. The way my voice said her name, low, uncertain, made her withdraw as if burned. Don't, she whispered. Not like that. We stood there, both pretending not to tremble. The door creaked suddenly. She flinched. A woman's voice called from the hallway, "Another client early." Elena's eyes darted to the door, then to me. "Wait here," she said quickly, voice low but firm. She stepped out, her calm tone filtering through the thin wall. I couldn't make out the words, just the warmth she wrapped around them, the same warmth she used on me when she wanted to hide what she felt. When she returned, her hands were trembling slightly. "She'll come back later." "Close call," I said, forcing a smile. She didn't return it. "We shouldn't let it get that close again." Her words said one thing, the way she looked at me said another. The rest of the session played out in short beats. The click of the camera. Her breathing uneven. My pulse unsteady. Each movement pulled us closer, until distance was just a memory. At one point she leaned in to adjust my collar, her lips inches from my ear. I could feel her breath when she exhaled, slow, measured, but shaking faintly. I turned my head without thinking. Her eyes met mine. Neither of us moved. The silence cracked first. The hum of the lights, the faint sound of rain starting against the window, the world still moved, even if we couldn't. Her gaze dropped to my mouth, then back to my eyes. For a second, I thought she'd closed the distance. Then her phone buzzed. Loud, sharp, shattering. She stepped back instantly, a hand to her chest, pretending to check the message though her screen stayed dark. "I should adjust the lighting," she said, voice barely steady. I nodded, unable to look away. "Right. The lighting." But the room hadn't changed. The light was fine. Everything else was what had shifted, the air, the pulse between us, the quiet that wouldn't go away. When I left that evening, the rain had stopped, but her voice stayed in my head. Not the words, just the breath she'd caught right before she didn't kiss me. By the fourth session, pretending became impossible. We both still tried, she with her clipped professionalism, me with my careful distance. But every look, every silence betrayed us. It was late this time, the studio washed in amber light from the setting sun. The blinds cast long lines across the wall, slicing through the quiet. She was already there, standing by the window, arms folded, staring out as though she'd been waiting for something she didn't want to arrive. "You look tired," I said softly. She didn't turn. "I've had a long week." "Then maybe we shouldn't." "No," she interrupted. "Let's finish what we started." Her tone was steady, but the way her hands gripped her elbows said otherwise. When I stepped closer, she didn't move away. The air between us felt charged, fragile. I could hear the faint tremor in her breath. "Elena," I said, quieter this time. She finally faced me. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes, but her expression was sharp, like she'd decided something and regretted it all at once. "This can't keep happening," she whispered. "I know. But here we are." We both laughed softly, a strange, helpless sound. Then she lifted her camera, a weak attempt at reclaiming control. "Let's work." I stood under the light, but neither of us cared about angles or exposure anymore. She came closer, framing the shot, her fingers brushing my shoulder as she adjusted my stance. "Relax," she said. "I can't." Her lips parted. "Why?" "Because you're too close." Her hand faltered. The camera lowered. "You shouldn't say that." "Then stop standing so close," I whispered back. Her eyes softened, not in surrender, but in recognition. She understood exactly what I meant. I reached up, hesitating before tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her breath hitched. She didn't move away. My fingers lingered a second too long against her skin. "You don't know what you're doing," she said, voice trembling. "Maybe not," I admitted. "But neither do you." She let out a shaky laugh, one that broke halfway through. "You shouldn't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you mean it." I took a small step forward. Her back brushed the wall. The camera strap slid from her shoulder, thudding softly against the floor. "Elena," I murmured, "tell me to stop." She didn't. Instead, she closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them again, gaze raw, unguarded. "You have no idea how long it's been since someone looked at me like this," The confession hung between us, heavy and dangerous. I leaned in, close enough to feel her breath tremble against my cheek. For a moment, nothing existed but the pulse in my ears and the warmth of her body just inches away. Then came the sound, the faint buzz of her studio intercom. A client, a delivery, reality knocking on the door. She exhaled shakily, eyes still locked on mine. "Don't move," she whispered, as if staying still could undo what had already happened. I didn't. Variant, standard title, She was my photographer, Part 5, The Twist. ID, 49625. It happened 3 days after the near kiss. I'd spent the time trying to convince myself that I'd imagined it, the look in her eyes, the way her breath had caught. But when I arrived at the studio, she wasn't there. The lights were off, the curtain half drawn. On the table sat her camera, and beside it, a printed photo. Me. Unposed. Caught between expressions, eyes fixed on her. A moment I didn't remember her taking. "Don't touch that," she said behind me. I turned. She was in the doorway, hair still damp from rain, her coat clinging to her shoulders. Her tone wasn't angry, just exposed. "I didn't mean, I know," she cut in, stepping inside. "It's fine. I just didn't think you'd see that one." "Why not?" "Because I wasn't supposed to take it." The admission landed like static in the quiet. She moved past me, reaching for the print, but her hand shook. I caught her wrist before she could. Her pulse raced under my fingers. "Elena, you were watching me." Her eyes flicked up, glassy but defiant. "You think you're the only one who gets to look?" The words broke something open. Neither of us moved for a long moment. Finally, she whispered, "I've tried to stop this." "Then why call me back?" She laughed softly, bitterly. "Because I wanted to see if I could still control myself." She pulled her wrist free, pacing toward the window. "You're too young. People will talk. They'll say I'm pathetic. Desperate. Let them talk." She turned sharply, eyes blazing. "You don't understand what that costs someone my age." "Then teach me." The room fell still again. Rain began tapping against the glass, slow and steady. I walked toward her, every step uncertain. She didn't move, just watched me with that same mix of defiance and fear. "I didn't lie to you," she said finally. "But I didn't tell you everything either." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, long enough for the silence to turn sharp. "I sent those photos to the exhibit committee," she said. Without asking. The words hit harder than I expected. "You what?" "I thought I could justify it. You were just another subject, I told myself. But the truth is—" She stopped, eyes closing. "I wanted to keep looking at you." The confession hung in the air, raw and trembling. I stepped closer, so close I could see the raindrops caught in her lashes. "You don't have to apologize for that," I said quietly. She shook her head. "You should be angry." "I am," I admitted. "But I'm also still here." Something flickered behind her eyes, relief, maybe, or surrender. She let out a shaky breath. "Then you're making the same mistake I did." She reached up, fingertips brushing my cheek, a touch light enough to disappear if either of us breathed wrong. "I can't promise I'll stop," she whispered. "But you need to decide if you'll let me." Her hand lingered there, trembling, waiting for my answer. And though either of us moved, the distance between us vanished anyway. Variant, standard title, She was my photographer, Part 6, The Climax. ID, 49626. The studio felt smaller that night. She texted again, asterisk. "One last session." Asterisk, I didn't ask why. I already knew. When I arrived, the blinds were half closed, only a strip of moonlight slicing across the floor. The camera was set up, but untouched. She was leaning against the desk, arms crossed, like she'd been rehearsing what to say. "This isn't about the photos anymore, is it?" I asked. Her lips curved faintly. "No. It stopped being that a long time ago." I stepped closer. Then what is it? Her eyes found mine. A mistake. One I keep wanting to make. For a moment, neither of us breathed. The clock ticked softly somewhere behind me. Elena, don't, she whispered, but she didn't move. I reached out anyway, brushing my fingers against her sleeve, slow, tentative, waiting for her to stop me. She didn't. Her breath caught. You shouldn't look at me like that. Then stop standing so close. She almost laughed, but it broke halfway through. You'll regret this someday. Maybe, I said. But not tonight. That silence between us, the one that had haunted every session, finally cracked. She reached for me first. Not a full embrace, not yet, just her hand against my chest, the warmth of her palms sinking through fabric. I covered it with mine. Her pulse was racing. I've spent years teaching myself not to need anyone, she murmured. And now you walk in and ruin all of it. I'm sorry. No, she said softly. You're not. The air thickened, that quiet just before everything changes. I lifted my hand, tracing a strand of hair from her face. Her eyes fluttered shut, just for a second, and when they opened again, they didn't hide anymore. I keep thinking this will fade, she whispered. That I'll come to my senses. And? Her lips trembled. It hasn't. She leaned forward then, not enough to erase the space between us, but enough that I could feel her breath when she spoke. Tell me this isn't real. I didn't. Couldn't. Instead, I let my forehead rest against hers, the faintest touch, the kind that feels louder than any sound. The world outside disappeared, no rules, no age, no reason left. Just the hum of lights and two people who had run out of ways to pretend. Elena, I whispered. Don't say my name like that, she said, but her voice was barely a breath. I lifted her hand from my chest, holding it between us. Then tell me to stop. She hesitated. Her thumb brushed across my wrist, once slow. I can't. That was the answer. For a moment, everything finally stilled, the years between us, the fear, the restraint, all of it burned quiet and steady, like something that had always been waiting to happen. When she finally looked at me again, her eyes were clear, not desperate, not afraid. Just certain. And in that certainty I knew, whatever came next, we both understood it couldn't be undone. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the studio blinds, the same light that had once made everything look staged, now soft and real. Elena was there before me, sitting cross-legged on the floor among scattered prints. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands falling around her face. She looked peaceful, almost younger. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her sort through the photographs, the pieces of what we'd been pretending not to feel. You're early, she said without looking up. So are you, I replied. She smiled faintly. Couldn't sleep. Me either. The silence between us was gentle this time, not the charged kind that left you holding your breath, but something softer, like an exhale after a storm. She held up one of the photos, studying it. You know, she said quietly, I almost deleted these. Why didn't you? She looked at me then, eyes clear. Because I wanted to remember that it wasn't just in my head. I walked closer, kneeling beside her. The floor was cool beneath us, the air faintly scented with her perfume and developing chemicals. The prints were scattered like pieces of a memory, my face in fragments, her shadow in the corners of each frame. I used to think age gave you control, she murmured. That if you've lived enough, you stop making reckless choices. I smiled. Guess that's not true. She laughed softly, shaking her head. Apparently not. I reached out and turned one of the prints toward her, the one she'd taken when she thought I wasn't looking. You said this was a mistake, I said. Do you still believe that? Her gaze lingered on the photo, then on me. Maybe it started as one, she admitted. But it doesn't feel like one now. The words were quiet, but they landed with weight. For a long moment, we just sat there, close enough to feel the warmth between us. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. She didn't pull away. Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining slowly, as if testing whether it was still allowed. I don't know what happens next, she whispered. Neither do I said. But for once, I don't care. She leaned into me then, not a kiss, not something meant to spark or rush, just her head resting against my shoulder, her breath steady against my neck. The world outside carried on, cars passing, sunlight shifting. But in that small, quiet room, everything finally felt still. After a while, she spoke again. You made me feel seen, she said softly. You always were, I answered. You just forgot how to look. She smiled at that, a real smile, unguarded and tired and beautiful. We sat like that until the light began to fade again, fingers still linked, the silence between us finally kind. Whatever rules we'd broken, whatever lines we'd crossed, they no longer felt like walls, just markers of where we began to find each other.